Hi there. This is the first step in making bread. We're going to make bread tomorrow, so the night before you have to prepare your starter. So I've got the starter mix here. Stir it up a little bit. Get the goop off the bottom, mix it up. And a couple tablespoons of that in some 80-degree water. And you dissolve that stuff. Just kind of mush it around, mix it up. 3/4 cup of warm water, and then you add a cup and a half of bread flour.
What flour is that?
Bread flour.
Bread flour.
And basically stir it up until it's proper goo.
Is there a particular brand of bread flour that you need?
No, bread flour is bread flour. You can go to the store and buy bread flour at Fred Meyer or Winco or something, but I do it at Costco because you can buy a 40-pound bag for about $8 and lasts me, I don't know, 5 or 6 months. So this is the consistency that it's sticky and wet, and this will allow it to just mix all the flour in so that it's all dampened, and then the starter mixture in there will get this going, and by tomorrow morning that amount will rise up to level with the top of this container, and that'll be the mixture we use to mix with more water and lots more flour tomorrow. So, till tomorrow. Good morning. Getting back to this bread making saga. Last night I made the leaven from the starter, and it occurred to me after I turned off the video that I'd forgotten a couple of things. The starter's in that jar, and to keep that alive, you add, and every time I make bread, I throw back in 2 tablespoons of water and 2 tablespoons of 50-50 wheat flour and bread flour. So 2 tablespoons of water, 2 tablespoons of that flour mix to replenish it. And that's what you also do to keep it alive in the fridge about once a week. Although if you forget a week or two, it doesn't really matter. You can throw the flour in and it rejuvenates. The other thing I kind of messed up on is that, that mixing last night, I made the leaven, 3/4 cup of water, lukewarm, and a cup and a half of flour, stirred together with a couple tablespoons of the starter. That sits overnight, and what I was gonna say is I usually turn the oven light on and stick it in the oven. That way it stays about 75-80 degrees, and it grows nicely overnight. That is called the leaven, and that's what we're gonna use here today. We're gonna take, again, warm water, the leaven, and then mix in flour. Just so saying, I usually make bags of pre-mix. You know, I just pre-measured the wheat flour and the white flour. It just makes it easy. I make 3 or 4 batches in bags, and then I don't have to make that floury mess every time I make bread. So I'm gonna get going today. I've heated some water. I found over time, I usually make a double batch of the bread, and I found over time that my mixture, when it calls for the double, actually it's 1.5 recipes, it calls for 4.5 cups of water, and usually about and then an 1/8 and a 1/16, and I find that the 1/2 cup, 1/8 and 1/16 of hot water and 4 cups of cold makes a pretty good temperature thing, so I don't have to screw around with it too much. Anyway, I'm gonna get going with that, and we'll go from there. I'm gonna put it on pause. All right, so here you go. Here's the leaven that was just a little bit in the bottom of the pan last night. Today it's grown up. I always cover it with a wet towel before I stick it in the slightly warm oven with just the light going, and it always grows up enough that I got to scrape it off the towel. That just happens. So there you have it. The stuff looks good. It's bubbly, airy, and I took the liberty while I was gone of making up the water. It was a little warm, so I threw in a couple of small ice cubes to chill it down a tiny bit, and that amount of water isn't going to affect the amount of fluid. I will say that the amount of fluid is these are high hydration breads, 70% hydration, and your yeast breads aren't like that. And so a little bit of water. After you've done this a bunch, you begin to figure out where you're at, and if it's too wet, you can always add a touch more flour. If it's too dry, you can always add a touch more water. I've emptied out my bowl. I will say, if I've got one thing I don't like about making bread, it's cleanup. This gooey stuff is absolutely awful. and I will say that I do use a fine sink drain strainer. I got a couple of them on Amazon for like $5 or something, and they catch all this bread dough so it doesn't go down your drain and cause problems. This leaven is floating in you can't see it, but trust me, it is. It's floating, it's full of air, and it's floating in the water. That's how you know the fact that it grew, the fact that it's floating are all good indicators that everything's going well. You have to dissolve that blob of leaven, and I gotta say, at the end of the day, the only way that I've found that really does it halfway good is to use your hand. I just squeeze it and break it up and mix it with the water, and it just takes time to do that until you just got a milky water, and it's gonna be little pieces, but there's not a big glom of this stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna do that and I'll come back. Okay, I'm back. I've massaged this leaven into the water. I've got a consistency, if you can just see it a little bit. It looks like thick, well, it looks like milk, that color. I was thinking about it while I was massaging that. This is the book that Tartine Bread by Chad Robertson. That was the friend of mine that got me into making it. He had used this book, and it's a great book, and I just found it, it's very comprehensive, and as I've done it more and more, I found that some of the steps you can cheat a lot, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. But excellent book, and a good read, and talks about lots of additives you can try to, and different things you can make with your sourdough. Some of the stuff I've made a few times, some of the stuff I haven't made at all. And the thing I keep coming back to is the bread, because it's the best bread I ever had, hands down. Anyway, so leaven mixed with the water in the right percentage. My bag of pre-mixed flour and whole wheat, whether it's right or wrong, I always put the whole wheat in last and dump that in first, best I can. And then I mix the whole wheat up with the leaven first, so that it'll be evenly dispersed. Well, the rest is predominantly white flour, so I just smash, gently mush the stuff in there until it forms big blobs. So I kind of crush them with a large spoon, and once they've sort of dissolved, I throw the rest of the flour in. I stir it up with the spoon until I can't really stir anymore. And the object being that you want to make all this water soak all the flour. The way to do that is, again, with the hand. You got to squish it. Nothing else works. I shouldn't say that. Nothing else works that I know of. I have not tried my KitchenAid with the dough hook. I don't know. Eventually I will, I'm sure, but a couple of years in, I haven't tried it yet. But I'm sure that will be a down the road when my hand gets tired or, oops, I get whatever, who knows. So I'm gonna dump in the rest of this flour. It's an oatload of flour. You have to start with a big vessel to hold all this stuff, all that water and all this flour. I did, many of the things I think in that book, I can't remember, but I think so. They say never use stainless steel and this and that and the other thing. Use glass, plastic, all this stuff. Well, when I went to this batch and a half, it's really a lot of stuff. I didn't have any bowls big enough, and I went and I researched a little bit of stainless steel history, and all this stuff about stainless steel being bad. It's based on old stainless steel back in the, I don't even know, 50s or whatever, and new stainless steel is doesn't leach. It was and I can't even remember what it was. It was some compound that stainless steel leached when you used it to mix this stuff. And the newer, in the last 20 years, the stainless steel has changed so much that it doesn't leach any of those molybdenum or whatever the heck it was. It just doesn't do that anymore. So that's no longer an issue. So, and to be honest, this bread dough is only in here, I don't know, for 45 minutes. For the rest of the time, I dump it into my rising bath. Now this stuff is just like as you can see, it's blobs of stuff, and I've got to massage it until it's a comprehensive. All the dough is even, all the flour is evenly wet, and it's a big spongy thing. And then after I get it done, there's a few key things that you can't cheat on, or I don't think you can cheat on. This, when you can see how this is just like goop, but after I finished getting all the flour mixed in and wet, it has a 30-minute, what they call bench rest, and you just let it sit in this, I throw the damp towel over the top and let it sit in this container for 30 minutes. And I gotta say, it's astounding. You come back and the consistency of this blob of stuff is it's dough. It's like you've been kneading it for an hour. It's just, suddenly it's soft and buttery and dough-like, whereas now it's just a hard clunk of stuff. So I'm gonna finish massaging this and let it sit 30 minutes, and then I'll come back. Till then. I'm back a wee bit early. I forgot one thing. I wanted to just mention it. I use a big spoon to scrape the early mix of the leaven and the flour, and then later to scrape the edges of the bowl. But as you see, your hand kind of looks like, I don't know, full of goop. So I also use the spoon to clean my hand when I'm done mixing. And later, it builds up on your fingers in this mixing process. And then after this bench rest, you mix in the salt and the reserve water, and your hand gets goopy then too. So that I don't really bother cleaning the spoon in between these two processes, in between those two steps. After that, when you're just turning the mix, if you wet your hand before you turn the bread, you don't get this kind of mess. So there you go, that's just a tip. Be back. Okay, so the bread's had its bench rest for 30 minutes. I just, off screen, measured the reserve water and poured it into the dough. They always say use kosher salt, so I measured the appropriate amount of kosher salt. And if you take a look here, you can see some water in the bottom and you see the salt on the top. And then you wet your hand and just mix that in. And like I told you before, after 30 minutes of sitting, you can just feel the consistency has completely changed of the dough. It feels like dough and not bread anymore. I mean, not flour and water anymore. So you just massage, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. That same technique. Squeeze the extra water into the flour mixture and squeeze. You're mixing the salt in as well. I gather it dissolves with the water as well, and
sort of mixes all around. Obviously, you kind of got to go fairly thorough or you'll have a salty spot. But by the time you massage it enough that you get all that water absorbed, everything's pretty well mixed. I've never had an issue with that.
And how much water did you put in there?
Oh, I put in whatever the amount is called for on my instructions for it's called the reserve. Okay. And that would be anybody that should want the instructions could email me that's way, william.busby@hotmail.com. And I can send you a copy of the directions. So I have basically all the steps written out, and the standard amount of dough is the one recipe, which makes, I don't remember what it makes. And then this, the recipe I make is just 1.5 normal recipes, and it makes 2 small and 2 big loaves. More about that later when we start forming up the loaves. But anyway, for now, I'll get back to you. After this mix, wait a second. After I finish mixing this, this is the rising bowl. It's a plastic 6 liter bowl that I bought on Amazon for like $10 bucks, something like that. And that is where I throw this dough when I'm done mixing it, which I nearly am. And it goes in there, and that's the rising bucket. Once again, I stick that into the oven with the light on, which keeps it just nice and warm. And then what you have to do is turn the dough every 30 minutes for 2 times, and then at 45 minutes the 3rd time. And quite honestly, I never turn it after that. It seems to be plenty of turning. The turning of the dough, I'll explain it as I do the first time, is what they say in the book is instead of kneading. I gotta say that this mixing business is pretty substantial, and there we go into the rising bucket. There's not much in here. If you want, you can scrape some bits out, but it's not even a crust. So anyway, that's it. Now I'm gonna throw the rag over the top and stick it back in the oven that has just the oven light on to keep it warm, and for 30 minutes, and I'll pull it out and I'll do the turn. I'll show you how to do that. Okay, now 30 minutes is passed, and we're ready for the first turning of the dough. And this is one of those steps that in that tartine bread book, I couldn't figure out what they were talking about, but a video I saw on YouTube did show it pretty clearly. So anyway, you wet your hand, and just as far as it goes, I wash my hands before every step that I start touching the dough, and I usually have chapped hands by the time I'm done making it. But you wash your hands, and then you wet the hand you're gonna turn with. You reach down, you pick the dough up and flip it on top, and you do it on I don't know, 3 or 4 quadrants. I guess 4 at this time. So each time you pull it up and put it on top, and that's a turn. And I do that at 30 minutes twice and 45 minutes once. And then I let the dough just continue to sit in the oven with the light on until it literally grows all the way up to the top here. So it's at least doubled in bulk, perhaps 60%. Sometimes I forget about it, I'm off walking or something, and it mushrooms over the top. It just happens. It doesn't seem to be a big deal. I'm gonna put the damp towel back on it, sticking it back in the oven with the light on, no heat. And then I just want to tell you one other thing. I mentioned before that I buy these sieve things on Amazon for keeping the dough out of the drain. And as I was getting ready to clean it out, I thought, oh my gosh, I should show these guys. Stupid things, but this dough is like glue. But if you take a dry paper towel and just run it over the bottom, and like this, it just kind of comes off and Some of it falls off, you pick it up later, but most of it goes into the paper towel. Same thing on the inside, you can just scoop it around and the junk comes loose. So I don't know of any studies or anything, but I cannot imagine that the consistency of this dough going down your drain is any good for your septic system or your plumbing. I had a couple other thoughts. That's just how do I clean that up? Another thought was after that last turn at 45 minutes, it takes generally 2 or 3 hours to rise up to that top of that bucket or a little bit over. You just got to keep an eye on it. But it's a good time if you got to run an errand or something. You got a couple hours anyway. And then I guess we have to thank Stephanie for being the videographer here.
You're welcome.
And we'll see what happens when we try to condense this into one long blurb. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the second 30-minute turn and the 45, and then I'll bring you back for the next process. Okay, so it's been a few hours, probably close to 3 hours, and this thing is probably 60% bigger, and it's ready to go. So you take this bench scraper, dough scraper, and easily available at Amazon for $10 or so. And I cleaned the countertop. It works well on marble with a little vinegar water solution. And so you basically pull this out of here, and it comes out pretty easily. This bread dough is so wet that it's pretty damn sticky. And at this point, you have to decide, take the quantity of dough you've made up and decide what your loaf pattern is going to be. I am going to make 1 large loaf and 4 small loaves with this amount of dough. So that would really be thirds. So I'm going to just use this thing as a chopper, and you never really get exact amounts. You can weigh it if you want. I have a scale, but this stuff sticks so badly that at the end of the day, I find it more trouble than it's worth. So what I'm gonna do is take the 2 biggest ones. Maybe this one needs this, I don't know. So now they're all pretty equal. I'll take the biggest one and turn it into 2 because I'm gonna take this big one and make it into the big one, and I'll take the 2 smaller ones and turn them into 2 smaller loaves. And what you do is, this is called, you kind of scrape around like this on the countertop to put tension in that dough. We're getting it ready for the second bench rest. And when it's shiny and taut like that, it's ready to go. So I just do that with all 3. If there's water on this, it slides instead of sticks, and it's harder to do. The nice thing about the marble, I've used other surfaces, but the marble is easy to clean. You just take the scraper and go across it when the stuff's dry, and it pops off, which is nice. So anyway, there's number 2. Number 3, it's gonna be a big one. So, you kind of move this in a figure of 8 and squish it along and changing the shape a little bit. You know what I was going to do for this one? So they generally say in the book, the tartine book, that you should add additives when you're after you squeeze in the salt, you should put additives. Well, I got to thinking about this later, and I decided that I wanted to make a garlic bread, so I'm going to do it differently. I roasted some garlic, and I'm going to mess up my hands to get them a little wet, which is a pain. But I think I can get away with, I was thinking about this, I think I can get away with stabbing this bread and pushing some chunks of roasted garlic in there, and stab and add. I've done this before and I never could add enough garlic to make it taste like a really garlicky bread. But today I cooked up an entire clove of garlic and I'm going for it once again. Gonna try. I think the reason they want you to add the garlic or additives in an earlier step is that by pushing around and doing all this mushing, I'm losing some of the air volume out of here and it may not be as light a loaf or something like that. My answer to that is let it rise a little longer and be done with it. We'll see. I will see how this goes. Some of these got pretty well smashed up, these cloves, so they're not big solid ones like that, like they used to be. But I think I'm getting a lot of garlic in here. It should be a tasty little booger. Almost done. My hands are gonna reek. All right, so now that I've mushed it all in and everything, unfortunately I have to rinse my hands over here. And you really don't want a lot of water on your hands for this operation, this pushing operation. I don't know what the hell happened here. I thought that one went in there. Anyway, I'm gonna try and fold this over so that it never knew I stabbed holes in it. And seal those mothers in there for this next step, and I'll see what happens. So this is a little experimental. It may or may not work. We'll find out. In any case, I've got them kind of tucked in now for the most part. Some of them are still popping, finding a way to pop out, but now I'm gonna try and get the bread in that state it was at before. I don't know whether I'll ever be able to achieve that again or not, but we'll see. I can feel the garlic cloves as I'm mushing around here. I think I'm gonna call a halt like this. I'm happy enough with it. Now I need to do this last one. I think by trying to put that garlic in, I made it a little scattered procedure. Anyway, I'm gonna cut this one in half. And I just saw some garlic over here. I think I'll get that off. And then these are the regular size ones for the smaller loaves. Roll it quick. This doesn't really have to take that long. Get one there. Get one here. It's just pushing it along and letting it roll, and then the first time I did it, it was completely, I couldn't figure it out, and then I saw it, you touch it, you hold it and push it so that it forms a little like a baseball or softball or something like that. Anyway, there you have it. 4 small ones, 1 big one, and I'm gonna cover them up and let them do the bench rest for half an hour. Set the timer. And then I'll come back and we'll form them into loaves and put them into the rising baskets. Okay, it's been 30 minutes for the bench rest for these loaves over here. They've grown a little bit, but now we fold them and form them into the shape of a loaf. Before you do that, once you get the loaf shaped, you want to plop them into the rising basket. And the rising basket has to be coated with this mixture of 50% rice flour and 50% wheat flour, whole wheat. I did a few in plain bread flour, my first couple of batches, and the bread stuck when I tried to get it out of these rising baskets, stuck like crazy. I watched a video I saw online and 10 common mistakes in sourdough, and it said use this combination, and this is slick. You use this. So I mix up a batch of 50-50 wheat and rice flour. That's the rice flour bag, but I put 50% wheat mixed with it as well. And then, I take my little fine strainer, put that mixture in there, and then just sift it like this, coating, I'll show you in a second. I coat the bottom and all the sides. I don't know if you can see that. I've already done it to these other rising baskets. For this, as I mentioned before, I'm gonna do 1 large loaf, this one here, and then these 4 small ones. Oh, I guess I did an extra one. I guess I did an extra large loaf. I don't need that one. And then, so I'm gonna form up these loaves now and then plop them into the basket. And then they take about another 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours to rise. I'm gonna do that in just 30 seconds. I'm gonna wash my hands real quick. What I can tell you is these rising baskets are available on Amazon. I bought these on Amazon, a 2-pack or something, and these are for a loaf-shaped pan. These are actually Easter baskets that I cut the hoop off of, and Stephanie sewed a delightful basket for the inside. So you might have to wait until Easter to get your own if you can't find what you need on Amazon at the moment. Anyway, so for this next step, you've already, like I showed you, we folded it and let it, bench rest. You put a little flour, not very much, because I found that the flour makes it not stick together when you fold it. But you take it out here and you spread it around. Can you see that? You fold it once, twice, and then I fold this once, twice, and then I fold this end to this end and this end to this end, and then this is the part I never could really figure out in the instructions in the book. But what I gathered and what works very successfully over time is you just keep pinching it up and bringing it up like this, forming a ball with a pinch on this side here, and you pinch it together so that it forms a seam, found a little bit of, and then you have this thing, and so when I put it in the basket, I put the smooth side down, because when I flip this into my cooking, the rough side is going to be down. And I tell you, at the end of the day, it smooths out anyway, so it's really not a big deal one way or the other. So I'm going to do all of these. I'm going to do the 2 round loaves first, and then I'll do the loaves. They require a little different alternate technique, a little bit. I need a tiny bit of flour. You really don't want too much, because if it's too sticky, it's a pain. But if it's too floury, it doesn't stick that great. So it's trying to find the perfect mix. So anyway, this is it. Once again, I'm going to fold it right over left, left over right, or other vice versa. Fold it together like this, bring it up into, and then gradually work it up into a ball with the top up here. Pinching, 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 pulling that stuff together. If you see any weird spots, just pull it up some more and do that. And then so that's close enough. Nice smooth ball, drop it into the rising basket. And now I'm gonna do it for the long loaves. I'm gonna do the same thing, the folding business. Maybe you're noticing there's a little black stuff on some of this dough. I think I turned here you go. I turned the oven on once when they were in there by accident, and I burned that one. So every now and then, if I use it, if I put it in the other one, inevitably comes off. It's just carbon, so I don't give it much worry. Now this one here, I'm trying to form a loaf that will make a long bread loaf, more or less, rather than a round bread loaf. And so the stuff is a pain because you're stretching and it bounces back, but you do your best. It's not super critical, because the longer it sits in the basket, it kind of fills it in. It fills to the shape of the form, but it's not as nice as the other one, but close enough. Plop it in there. As you can see, now I'm down to one more bread dough loaf. I'll fold this real quick. This doesn't really take too long. And then fold that up a little bit, fold this up a little bit, and then kind of roll it up and try and stretch it a little bit as you form it. into a longer torpedo, or not a torpedo, but a cylinder instead of a ball like the other one. It's close enough. And then stick it back in there. If you want to watch me flail with this one with the garlic in it, you can see garlic's popping out already. It's kind of oily, to tell you the truth, so it behaves a little bit weird. See the dough? So I'm seeing a problem that I have already. The dough doesn't like to stick to itself, so it makes it really hard to play the game I wanted to play. And so rather than fold it and do all that stuff I did with the other ones, I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to fold it into a ball and call it good. Otherwise, I'm likely to have a bunch of bread that sticks together, that won't stick together, and just keeps falling apart, which it seems like it's going to do anyway, but I'm going to try and make it not do it. But every time there's a little garlic popping up, it's greasy and it does not want to stick. So anyway, to be honest with you, it's not that critical. I'm going to pick it up, put it in this bowl. Now there is one, you can call it a trick, you can call it a technique, whatever, but it works very well. Everything that a problem that can occur is when you try to get these breads out of the rising basket and into the loaf, and the problem is they stick. So one more thing I do to prevent sticking is I pull the dough up and sprinkle a little of that here, a little here, a little here. Now it's already been, the rising basket's already been sifted, but I do it again anyway. And I do it for, obviously for all of them. When I take these out of the cooking pot, and I put them on the cooling rack, there's always a ton of this stuff on the bottom, but better to have a little of this stuff on the bottom than have the bread go flat or stick in the basket. So for alternatives, I'd rather have it come out of the basket. Let's see, I did that one. I got these two, and then I'm done. So I did say to you that you can buy, you can hunt around and buy rising baskets on Amazon. They should mimic the shape of your loaf. And I mean, I guess should mimic the shape of the container you're going to cook them in. And so before I go, I will just back up. Down here I have the cooking pots, and I use this. This is a small round one for these. I have this big one for that large loaf. And I have two of these, which are for the loaf. And I actually like these quite a bit. I thought there was a problem when I got them because all the books say you have to have a lid. You cook them half with the lid on and half with the lid off. The lid on creates a steam lift. In San Francisco, they have steam injectors into the oven. Some people put pans of water in the oven. All this to make it steamy and the bread lifts. Well, for 2 years I practically did that all the time, and I just made the ones I had. Then my daughter gave me two of these loaf pans with no lids. And so I thought one day, what the heck, I'll just try it. So I tried it, and they come out exactly the same as using the lids. The lids are just another thing to burn you. You have to take them on, you have to take them off. So I don't do lids anymore, and I get the same results. So anyway, obviously this mimics this mimics that, and the big guy mimics the big loaf. So yeah, I have an army of these things. So anyway, actually all these are Lodge cast iron cookware. I got them on Amazon. Seems to be the go-to place for sourdough bread supplies. And I got that little sifter on Amazon as well. So anyway, yeah. So these breads are the dough in these rising baskets is going to rise, probably take a couple of hours. I'm going to go to my grandkids' soccer game, and then I'll be back. We'll check them out, see how they are. Then you have to get the pots piping hot at 400 or 500. Transfer the loaves into the pots, reduce it to 450, and cook them for the required time. I'll get into that at that time. Okay, so in order to get the bread, which is really high and risen a lot into the loaf pans, which are 500 degrees, without burning yourself or causing the bread to deflate, one YouTube video on the sourdough suggested that this parchment paper is fabulous, and I would say it's a must-have. You can use it, as you'll see in a minute, to lower the bread into these piping hot pans, and without burning yourself and without flopping. The first few times I just kind of flopped the bread in there, and it fell a long way and deflated because it was such a drop. So that's no good either. So this is a fabulous way to get the bread in the pans. My small round pans, I literally have to cut the parchment paper like this so that it folds in. Otherwise, I get these huge bubbles and weird spots in the sides of the bread. As I said, for that big round loaf, it doesn't seem to matter a whole lot. Not really neither here nor there. So, all right, I am almost done with this. I'm trying to speed along because while we were having dinner, the bread got pretty tall and ready to go. All right, so that's for the rounds. They're about 6 or 8 inch rounds. This is for I pre-folded them a little bit, and I just, you could get technical and measure, but I just do this by eyeball. It looks about the right width, about 4 inches, and it's about the right length, about 8 inches or something like that. And then I pull out the corners so that when I lower it in, it just, whoop, goes in there. So this is the other, on the short ends. Okay, one more of these. Cut these squares out. You can see I wasn't terribly in the middle of this one. Try to square it up. Okay, so that's one square. Here's another square. Make this piece a little bigger. And then we'll go over and one at a time lift the piping hot 500 degree pots out of the oven, slip a loaf into them and pop them back in until they're all in there. Last one here. All right. And then, so here's the big round one, 2 flat ones, and the small round ones. I'm going to carry this junk over so it's near where I'm working. Fortunately, like I said, we had dinner, so there's a few dinner dishes hanging out. Get them out of the way real quick. All right. So these things have risen like crazy. They're going to make amazing loaves. Same with the 2 small round loaves. They've risen like crazy. Oddly enough, the one that I thought would be too big it's okay, but it's not. So I've seen these things up like this, practically ready to fall over. But that doesn't really matter too much right now.
Is that the garlic one?
Yeah, that's the garlic one. I don't think it's because of the garlic. I think it's just that as I said to you before, I kind of eyeballed it into thirds, and then 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, and maybe I was off. I would say, looking at it, I was off. But anyway, so now, I think I'm going to do a couple of, a round one and a square one first, I guess. This is a kind of a quick change operation here. Flip-flopping between these two. All right, so here you go. You put the paper over the risen loaf. I hold these 2 ends, flip it upside down, and lower it like that into the into the pan. Remember, it's 500 degrees, so you don't really want to touch it. All right, now this one here, I'm going to do two at one, two and then move on. Here's the first round small loaf. Same deal. Turn it like that, and the parchment just stays in there and cooks. It's perfectly okay. The one thing I didn't get ready, but I think I can have it ready pretty quick, is this is a lame. You're supposed to cut the bread. I usually put oil on it. It makes it a little better, but it's a fresh knife. I've used it only once or twice, so that's good. So those are ready to go back in the oven. And as soon as you put them in the oven, you're supposed to turn it down to 450 from the 500 degrees we had it at. I'm only a little bit concerned. I'm not quite sure. This thing's getting hot. That's too hot to fool with. All right. This is always a little bit dramatic. And today I'm trying to really get a lot of stuff into the oven. The oven is extremely full. I've never really cooked this many things. And that bread didn't like it too much. Maybe it was over risen. It seemed like it. This one looks better. All right, I'm gonna close that up. So like I say, as soon as you push things back in, you turn it down to 450. I gotta keep going. This is the worst part as far as getting it done timely. Everything kind of goes at once. When you cook so many breads at once, everybody needs to be in the same spot, and it's absolutely impossible to do everybody at once. Somebody's got to do first, somebody last. So that's that bread. That one's okay. And then the other, I'm missing one. Where's the other square one? All right, so the other square one. I got, as you can see, there's not much paper for the huge size of that bread. We'll do our best to get it where it belongs and rock and roll it in there. Okay, so once again, cut it with the lame and get them back in. All right, last one. For the big one, I usually just use a big square of paper, throw it over there, flip it upside down, like everybody else. Caught my knuckle on that edge. And it's hot. This one didn't go in quite as square as usual, but at least they're big enough that it doesn't seem to cause a problem about the wrinkling of the paper. Once again, I cut the top and then back up. Get this one in the oven. And then all 5 breads are in the oven. Good Lord, it's a little tight fit. I've never had it quite so snugly in there. One thing I can tell you, a trick I also saw in that video is you always have the bottom rack at the lowest portion of the oven, the top one at the highest. You only use the bottom rack. So all the heat's coming from the bottom, so you can burn the bottoms of your loaves. And one of the tricks to prevent that from happening is you can take a large cookie sheet, and after the first portion of the cooking is done, you can, first half, you can slide the cookie sheet under it. Disperses the heat a little better, and then you don't get quite as burned at bottom. I just remember that I haven't set the timer. The small loaves seem to take 17 minutes on each side, so 34 minutes total. I think last time I cooked it for 30 minutes. So I'm gonna set my alarm for 30 minutes. It's already been 2 or 3. The first ones were in already 3 or 4. So I'll put them in for 30 minutes. That big one may need to cook a little bit more. Typically I cook the big ones about 20 minutes twice, so 40 minutes. So the little guys need 10 minutes less. So we will go from here and see what we can see. But I'll start it at 30 minutes. We'll go from there, see how they turn out. All right, okay, the breads have been in for about 20 minutes. We're gonna take a peek at them in a second. I just wanted to say to you, so these things get damp from all the moisture from the bread. I usually will take them out and set them in the sun, and then when they're really dry, I take them and I rub them. The loose old flour comes off, and then I just beat them and it's gone. But so it's nighttime now, so I obviously can't put them out, but I will tomorrow because these heavier ones stay quite a bit damp, and you don't want to put them away damp because they could easily mildew. Now, meanwhile, over here, if you take a peek in the oven, our breads are looking pretty dang good. There's the garlic loaf and the other 4. They're looking pretty brown. They got 10 more minutes. I'm a bit worried about the bottoms burning, and I told you about that trick. How you can take a cookie sheet and put it under them. But I've got that oven so stuffed with loaves today that there's no room for a cookie sheet. So I'm just gonna have to bite the bullet. And I pulled that one out because I'll probably, when I take the 4 small loaves out, I'll put that under the big loaf. So if it's in there for another 10 minutes, the bottom's not burning. But, so we'll give them another 10 minutes, then we'll pull them out. Usually I grab them out, put them on the top of the stove, and I'm gonna set up some cooling racks here, and I lift out the bread with those paper things and set it over and let it cool. And then when it's done, I put it in plastic bags, but we'll show you. See you in a bit. The timer's going off. Breads are done. Out the oven they come. I was a little worried about burning the bottoms on these things because the oven's so full and I couldn't get anything under there. I hope for the best, but I've had some burnt bottoms before, and it's not an insurmountable problem usually. Usually super bad, you can just cut that piece off. Otherwise, you can just ignore it. These are looking really good on top. I put the pan underneath the big loaf. It needs to go for another, probably, I'm gonna give it another 5 minutes. It's not that huge. Now, these guys, I'm gonna get out of the pans and carry them over like this. Bottom doesn't look too bad. Looks pretty darn good. So I lift these guys out, carry them over, usually swipe the paper out from under them. I did mention to you guys earlier that all the books say that you have to cover them for the first half, then take the covers off and let them cook. The second half they brown up, but as you can see, they look pretty tasty and toasty, and there is really no problem that I can tell with that one's got a little bit of a brown bottom. No problem. Lost my train. All right. So those are the 4 first ones. Looking quite good. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Back up. Here's a loaf I cooked a few days, maybe a week ago. Just took it out of the freezer earlier today. But I don't know if you come into the light, you can see that this is the bread. It's that density. It's really quite light, quite fluffy, airy. And the sourdough is fantastic because you can freeze it and take it out of the freezer, let it thaw, and it's good for about 5 days. In 2 years, I think I've had 1 loaf grow mold. Usually it gets eaten so quickly that it doesn't get a chance. But at 4 or 5 days, easily, no problem. And if you toast it, which I almost always do, it's It's like right out of the oven. It's fantastic. So anyway, there you have it. The culmination of a long day. It is a long day. It's what is it? 8 o'clock at night, and we started this last night. Well, didn't do anything overnight, but this morning I got going about 8 o'clock or so, and my gosh, here it is 8 o'clock this evening. So it's a process. It takes time, but it's enjoyable, and I gotta say, we haven't eaten anything but sourdough bread for 2 years, and I don't even think I could go back to store-bought if I wanted to. All right, so anyway, if I think of anything else, I'll give a little add-on, but for now, that's about it.